Dad, please don't come. Jessica and her family are uncomfortable if you and Mom show up. I already told everyone you're traveling. Please don't put me in an awkward position. The words hit my phone screen like a slap across the face at 7:42 a.m. on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. My son Kevin was getting married, and he was telling me not to come. My name is Richard Pierce. I'm 58 years old, and I've been building things my whole adult life. First for Uncle Sam in the Army for 8 years, then with my own construction company for the past 25. I built homes, I built a business, I built a family. I thought I'd built a good son too. That Saturday morning in September, staring at that text message, I realized I might have been dead wrong about that last part. I stood there in our bedroom, my good dress shirt hanging open, the dark blue tie Patricia had picked out for me draped around my neck. The same tie she said made me look distinguished, like a man who'd earned his place in the world through honest work. I guess Kevin's new family didn't see it that way. Patricia was in the bathroom, taking her time with her makeup. She'd been looking forward to this day for months, ever since Kevin announced his engagement to Jessica Crawford. Patricia had been practicing her smile in the mirror, working on her speech patterns, making sure the slight slur from her stroke 6 months ago wouldn't embarrass anyone. She'd bought a new navy dress, had her hair done at the salon for the first time since the hospital. This was going to be her comeback day, her chance to show the world that Patricia Pierce was still here, still strong, still the woman who'd stood beside me through everything. Now I had to figure out how to tell her we weren't welcome. I read Kevin's message again, looking for some other interpretation. Some way it could mean something different than what it obviously meant. In the Army, you learn to read orders carefully because misunderstanding them can get people killed. In construction, you triple-check blueprints because being off by an inch can bring down a whole building. But there was no misreading this. My own son, the boy I'd taught to swing a hammer, the kid who used to ride on my shoulders at job sites, was uninviting his parents from his wedding day. Patricia emerged from the bathroom, moving carefully but steadily. The stroke had slowed her down, but it hadn't dulled that sharp mind of hers. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Richard, what is it?" I handed her the phone without saying anything. After 30 years of marriage, she could read my expressions like I could read a construction site. She knew when to ask questions and when to just wait for me to find my words. She read the message once, then again. Her face went through a series of changes: confusion, hurt, anger, then something harder to define. Resignation, maybe. Or determination. "I don't understand," she said, quietly, sitting down on the edge of our bed. Why would he? I didn't have an answer yet. But something was nagging at me, something that didn't add up. Kevin had always been proud of us before. Sure, he'd gotten fancy ideas since college, started talking different, wearing those expensive clothes, but he'd never been ashamed of who we were. At least, I didn't think he had. "Patricia, honey, let me ask you something. This wedding of Kevin's, he told us it was going to be small and simple, right? Just family and close friends?" She nodded. "That's what he said. Intimate ceremony. Casual reception. He said they didn't want anything fancy." "Then why?" I said, walking over to my dresser and pulling out the wedding invitation we'd received 3 months ago. "Does this thing look like it cost more to print than most people spend on their whole wedding?" The invitation was heavy cardstock, gold-embossed lettering, the kind of thing you see in magazines about how rich people live. "The honor of your presence is requested at the marriage of Kevin Michael Pierce to Jessica Marie Crawford at the Crawford family estate." Crawford family estate. Not a church, not a community hall, not even a nice hotel. An estate. "Richard," Patricia said slowly, "how much do you think a wedding like this costs?" That's when it hit me. The nagging feeling I'd been having for weeks suddenly crystallized into something cold and sharp in my stomach. Kevin had been asking a lot of questions lately about the business, about our finances, about the mountain cabin we'd owned for 15 years. Questions that seemed innocent at the time, but now, "I need to check something," I said, walking quickly to my home office. Patricia followed me, her dress shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor. I fired up my laptop and logged into the Pierce Construction Company business account. For the past 2 years, I'd made Kevin a co-signer, given him the authority to handle vendor payments and manage some of the day-to-day financial operations. He was my son, my heir apparent, the person I was grooming to eventually take over the business I'd built from nothing. The account summary loaded, and my blood went cold. The balance was $30,000 lower than it should have been. I started scrolling through recent transactions, my heart pounding harder with each line item I read. $15,000 to Elite Events and Catering, Crawford Wedding, $12,000 to Luxury Floral Design, Crawford Pierce Ceremony, $8,500 to Premium Photography Studios, Wedding Package, $18,000 to Crawford Estate Venue Services, $7,200 to Symphony String Quartet, $4,800 to Exclusive Transportation Services, $6,300 to Designer Bridal Boutique, $8,900 to Gourmet Wedding Catering Upgrade. The list went on and on. Payment after payment, all made in the past 3 months, all authorized with Kevin's digital signature using the access I'd given him. Each transaction was perfectly legal. He had the authority to make them. But every single one was a lie. "Oh my God," Patricia whispered behind me. She'd been reading over my shoulder. "Richard, that's $85,000, I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. $85,000 for a small, intimate wedding. But that wasn't the end of it. There was a document in our shared cloud storage that I'd never seen before. A loan application. My signature at the bottom, electronic signature, authorized through my business account. Kevin had taken out an equity loan against our family cabin. Our cabin, the place where I'd taught him to fish when he was 7 years old, where we'd spent every summer vacation, where Patricia and I had talked about retiring someday, where 3 generations of Pierces had carved their initials into the big oak tree by the lake. He'd put it up as collateral for his wedding. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My son had stolen $85,000 from my business and mortgaged our family property, all to pay for a wedding that his new wife's family apparently didn't want us to attend. "Patricia," I said quietly, "go sit down for a minute." This is worse than I thought. She didn't argue. The stroke had taught her to pick her battles, to conserve her energy for when it really mattered. Something told me we were going to need all our strength for what was coming next. I sat there in my home office, surrounded by 25 years of business awards, photos of construction projects I'd completed, certificates of appreciation from the community. I'd built a life based on honesty, hard work, and treating people right. I'd raised my son to value those same things. Apparently, I'd failed. But as I stared at those numbers on the screen, as the full scope of Kevin's betrayal sank in, something else was building inside me. Not just hurt, not just anger, but something colder and more focused. I was Richard Pierce. I'd served my country with honor. I'd built a successful business from nothing. I'd raised a family and taken care of my community. I'd earned every dollar in that account with my own sweat and blood. And I'd be damned if I was going to let anyone, even my own son, steal from me and then tell me I wasn't good enough to witness the results. Kevin wanted a wedding? Fine. He was going to get one he'd never forget. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Anthony Williams. Tony and I had served together in Germany back in the 80s, spent 2 years watching each other's backs in a world where trust wasn't just important, it was survival. These days, he ran a small law practice in town, specializing in business contracts and family law. More importantly, he was the kind of friend who'd answer his phone at 8:15 on a Saturday morning when you needed help. "Tony, it's Richard. I need you to look at some documents right now. It's important." "What's going on, Rick?" His voice was alert, professional. Tony had always been good at reading situations, knowing when something was serious without having to ask a bunch of questions. "My son has been stealing from me. I need to know what my options are." There was a pause. "How much are we talking about?" "85,000 so far. Maybe more." "Can you do a video call? I want to show you what I'm seeing. Give me 2 minutes to get to my office." While I waited, I made a list of every transaction, every date, every vendor, old habits from the Army. Document everything, verify everything, trust but verify. Patricia sat quietly in the corner chair, still in her wedding dress, watching me work. Her face was calm, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She'd been the bookkeeper for Pierce Construction for 20 years before the stroke. She knew these numbers as well as I did. "Richard," she said softly, "look at the dates on those payments." I looked. She was right. The first payment had been made 3 days after Kevin announced his engagement. Not after they'd planned the wedding, not after they'd chosen a venue. 3 days after he'd proposed to Jessica Crawford. "He planned this from the beginning," I said. "The whole thing. The modest wedding story, the access to the accounts, asking about the cabin. This was never about love. This was about putting on a show for the Crawford family." My phone rang. Tony's face appeared on the screen, and I could see he was in his law office, legal books and file cabinets behind him. I shared my computer screen and walked him through everything: the unauthorized payments, the cabin equity loan, the forged signatures on documents I'd never seen. Tony listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his face the way he used to do when we were trying to solve a particularly difficult problem in the service. "Rick, this is bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. Kevin has signatory authority on your business account, so technically these aren't theft, in the legal sense. But the cabin loan, that's different. That required your specific authorization, and if he forged your electronic signature, he used my business login credentials. I gave him access for legitimate company business, but not for personal use, not for wedding expenses. That's a breach of fiduciary duty at minimum, possibly fraud." Tony leaned forward. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" I looked over at Patricia. She was nodding slightly, that look in her eyes that I'd learned to recognize over 3 decades of marriage. It was the same look she'd had when she decided to go back to school at 35 to get her accounting degree. The same look when she'd insisted we take out a second mortgage to expand the business when everyone said it was too risky. The look that said, "Do what's right, and I'll back you up. I want to stop everything, right now, today." Can I do that? You're the primary account holder. You have every legal right to freeze Kevin's access and reverse any payments that haven't been processed yet. But Rick... Tony's expression grew serious. "If you do this, there's no going back. That wedding Kevin's planning? It won't happen. Not today, anyway." "Good," I said. "If he wants to get married on my dime, he should have asked. If he wants to exclude me from the ceremony, he can exclude my money too. What about the cabin loan? Can we stop it? I'll need to file some paperwork, but yes, it was obtained under false pretenses using unauthorized access to your credentials. We can void it." I felt something I hadn't felt since that morning when I'd first read Kevin's text message. Control. For the past 3 hours, I'd been reacting to discoveries, trying to process betrayals, feeling like a victim of my own son's deception. Now I was taking action. Do it, I said, all of it. I want Kevin's access to company accounts terminated immediately. I want every pending payment canceled. And I want that cabin loan voided before they can process any more paperwork. Rick, you sure about this? Once we start making calls, word's going to get around. This is going to be public pretty quickly. I thought about that text message again. About Patricia practicing her smile in the mirror. About 25 years of building a business that was supposed to be Kevin's legacy someday. About teaching him to work with his hands, to value honest labor, to respect the people who'd helped us build our life. Tony, my son just told me I'm not welcome at his wedding because my presence would be embarrassing to his new family. Then I find out he's been stealing from me for months to pay for a party I'm not invited to. You tell me, what exactly do I have left to lose? Tony smiled for the first time during the call. It was the same grin he used to get right before we tackled a particularly challenging mission. All right, brother, let's go to work. The next hour was a series of phone calls. Tony handled the legal side while I dealt with the banks and credit companies. We moved fast and efficiently, like the team we'd been 30 years ago. By 9:30 a.m., Kevin's access to all company accounts was frozen. By 10 a.m., every vendor expecting payment for his wedding would be calling him with the same message. Payment denied, authorization revoked. Patricia had been quiet through most of this, but now she stood up and smoothed down her dress. "Are we going to the wedding?" she asked simply. I looked at her. This strong, dignified woman who'd stood by me through deployments and business failures and late-night emergencies when workers got hurt on job sites. Who'd fought her way back from a stroke that could have broken her spirit. Who'd been looking forward to this day for months. "Yes," I said. "We're going. But not the way they expect us to." I walked to my closet and pulled out a different shirt. Not the formal dress shirt Patricia had picked out, but my best work shirt, the navy blue one with Pierce Construction embroidered in white letters over the sore left pocket. It was clean, pressed, professional looking, but it also sent a message about who I was and what I represented. "Richard?" Patricia was watching me with curiosity, not concern. "If Kevin's ashamed of what I do for a living, then he's going to get a close look at it today," I said, buttoning up the shirt. "I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not for the Crawford family's comfort." I paired the work shirt with my best dress pants and my polished work boots, the ones I wore when I had to meet with architects or city officials, times when I needed to look professional, but didn't want to hide what I did for a living. The boots were comfortable, practical, and had walked through every job site I'd ever managed. Patricia nodded approvingly. "You look like yourself," she said. "That's better than looking like someone you're not." We drove to the Crawford estate in my pickup truck. I could have taken Patricia's sedan, could have tried to blend in with the other wedding guests, who'd probably arrive in luxury cars and hired drivers. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. The truck had Pierce Construction. Building Dreams. Since 1998, painted on the side panels, along with my phone number and contractor's license information. Let the Crawford family and their friends see exactly who they'd been taking money from. The estate was even more impressive than I'd imagined from the wedding invitation. Rolling hills, manicured lawns, a circular driveway lined with expensive cars. The kind of place where the landscaping budget probably exceeded most people's annual salary. I parked between a Mercedes and a BMW, and couldn't help but notice how my work truck looked exactly like what it was, a vehicle owned by someone who actually worked for a living. Patricia took my arm as we walked toward the ceremony area. Her steps were careful but steady, and I could feel her gathering strength with each step. The stroke had taught her to conserve energy for the moments that mattered. Something told me this was going to be one of those moments. "Richard," she said quietly as we approached the garden where white chairs were arranged in perfect rows. I want you to know something. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. We have nothing to be ashamed of." The ceremony area was filling up with guests, and I had to admit it was beautiful. White flowers everywhere, string quartet playing softly, the kind of elegant setup you see in magazines. It was also exactly the kind of wedding that cost $85,000. My $85,000. I spotted Kevin near the altar, looking nervous in his rented tuxedo. He kept checking his watch and scanning the crowd, probably wondering why his vendors weren't returning his calls. Next to him stood his best man, some college friend I'd met once who'd spent the entire dinner talking about his job at an investment firm and asking pointed questions about whether construction was still a viable career path in today's economy. Then I saw Jessica. She was surrounded by her bridesmaids, all of them in matching lavender dresses that probably cost more than most of my workers made in a week. Jessica looked radiant in her wedding dress, and why wouldn't she? She was about to marry into what she thought was a wealthy family, have a ceremony paid for with money she'd never had to work for, and never again have to worry about associating with people who actually built things for a living. I was watching this scene, trying to decide exactly when and how to make my presence known, when I heard something that made my blood run cold. "I still can't believe Kevin's parents couldn't make it," one of the bridesmaids was saying. "I mean, what kind of emergency trip keeps you from your own son's wedding?" Jessica laughed, a light, musical sound that carried across the garden. "Oh, they're not really traveling. Kevin just told them not to come." I mean, can you imagine? His father showing up in work clothes with dirt under his fingernails, his mother with that speech impediment from her stroke. It would have been so awkward for everyone. The women around her giggled in agreement. One of them, a blonde in pearls who looked like she'd never worked a day in her life, added, "I think it shows real maturity on Kevin's part. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices to protect the people you love." "Exactly," Jessica agreed. "I mean, they're sweet people, I'm sure, but they just don't fit in with our crowd." Kevin understands that now. He's grown so much since we've been together. Patricia's grip on my arm tightened. I looked down at her and saw that her jaw was set in a way I recognized. She'd heard every word, and she was furious. Not hurt, not embarrassed, furious. "Richard," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the slight slur from the stroke. "I want you to know that I've never been ashamed of who we are. Not for 1 second. And I'm not starting today." That's when I saw Mr. Crawford approaching us. He was a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, with the kind of confident bearing that comes from never having to worry about money. His eyes took in my work shirt, my boots, Patricia's off-the-rack dress, and I saw him reach some conclusions. "Excuse me," he said, his tone polite but dismissive. "I think there might be some confusion. This is a private ceremony. Are you perhaps with the catering staff?" The catering staff. This man assumed that because I was dressed like someone who worked for a living, I must be there to serve his guests. Patricia straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Crawford," she said clearly. "I'm Patricia Pierce. This is my husband, Richard. We're Kevin's parents." Mr. Crawford's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, embarrassment, then something that looked like calculation. "Oh," he said. "But I thought—" "Kevin said you were traveling, out of the country." "Kevin says a lot of things," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Not all of them are true." Before Mr. Crawford could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Anthony. "It's done. All payments canceled, accounts frozen, cabin loan voided. Kevin's been trying to call you for the past hour. Several vendors have already contacted the venue asking about payment." I looked around at the beautiful ceremony setup, at the expensive flowers and professional photography equipment, at the string quartet, and the elegant crowd of people who thought they were too good to associate with the man who'd paid for everything they were enjoying. "Mr. Crawford," I said, "I think there are some things about today's ceremony that you should know." Patricia squeezed my arm again, but this time it wasn't to calm me down. It was to let me know she was ready for whatever came next. The time for secrets was over. I didn't need to make a scene. The scene was about to make itself. Kevin spotted us from across the garden and went pale. He excused himself from his groomsmen and started walking toward us, but he was too late. The wedding coordinator, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard, was already approaching with panic in her eyes. "Mr. Crawford," she said urgently, "we have a situation. The caterer is asking for immediate payment before they'll begin service. The florist is threatening to remove the arrangements, and the string quartet is packing up their instruments." Mr. Crawford frowned. "I don't understand." Kevin assured us everything was handled. "That's because Kevin isn't paying for this wedding," I said loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I am. Or rather, I was until I canceled all the payments this morning." The coordinator looked confused. "Sir, I don't think... My name is Richard Pierce. I own Pierce Construction Company. For the past 3 months, my son has been using my business accounts to pay for this ceremony without my knowledge or permission. This morning, I discovered that he'd spent $85,000 of my money and used our family property as collateral for additional loans." A small crowd was gathering now. Mr. Crawford's face had gone from confusion to embarrassment to anger. "Kevin," he called out, "get over here right now." Kevin arrived looking like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Jessica was right behind him, her wedding dress rustling as she walked quickly across the grass. "Dad, please," Kevin started. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "Explain how you stole $85,000 from the company that employs 15 families. Explain how you mortgaged the cabin where your grandfather taught me to fish and I taught you. Or explain how you told me not to come to your wedding because my presence would be embarrassing." Jessica's face went white. "Kevin, what is he talking about?" "The money for this wedding," I said, looking directly at her, "came from my construction company's accounts. The same company you just told your friends you were embarrassed to be associated with. I could see more guests gathering, trying to figure out what was happening. The string quartet had indeed stopped playing." "Kevin," Mr. Crawford said, his voice deadly calm. "Is this true?" Kevin opened his mouth, closed it, then looked around at all the faces staring at him. Finally, he nodded. "I was going to pay it back," he said weakly. "The business is doing well, I thought." "You thought wrong," I said. "You thought you could steal from your family to impress people who look down on us. You thought you could erase us from your life when it became convenient." Jessica's reaction was immediate and furious. "You lied to me," she shouted at Kevin. "You told me your family had money. You said you could afford all this." "We do have money," Kevin protested. "The business is successful. The family assets belong to me," I interrupted. "And as of this morning, you no longer have access to any of it." That's when the vendors started arriving. The caterer first, a professional-looking woman who clearly wasn't interested in the family drama but needed her payment. Then the photographer, asking about his check. The florist wanted to know if she should start removing the arrangements. Mr. Crawford looked around at the chaos developing and made a decision. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the assembled guests, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about today's arrangements. The ceremony will need to be postponed." "Postponed?" Jessica spun around. "Postponed? There's not going to be a ceremony at all." She turned back to Kevin with fury in her eyes. "You humiliated me. You humiliated my family. This is over, Kevin. We're done." She stormed off toward the house, her bridesmaids following behind like a lavender-colored parade of confusion and embarrassment. Kevin stood there in his rented tuxedo, looking lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Dad," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected him. "You chose to steal from me. You chose to lie to me. You chose to be ashamed of the family that raised you and the work that paid for your education and your lifestyle. Those weren't mistakes, Kevin. Those were decisions." Patricia stepped forward. Her voice was steady, clear despite the slight slur from her stroke. "Kevin, we loved you enough to give you everything. We thought that would be enough to teach you to value it." Kevin looked like he wanted to say something else, but Mr. Crawford put a hand on his shoulder. "I think you should leave," he said firmly. "My family has been embarrassed enough for one day." Patricia and I walked back to my truck through the scattered groups of confused wedding guests. Behind us, I could hear vendors negotiating with the Crawford family about payment, could hear the chaos of a $85,000 wedding falling apart in real time. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked as we drove away from the estate. I thought about it. "Sad," I said honestly, "but not sorry." That evening, Patricia and I sat on our back deck, watching the sun set over the city we'd spent 30 years building our life in. My phone had been buzzing all day. Kevin calling, texting, leaving voicemails that I hadn't listened to yet. "Will you forgive him?" Patricia asked. "Someday, maybe," I said. "When he learns the difference between being sorry he got caught and being sorry he did wrong. When he understands that respect isn't something you're born with, it's something you earn." 3 months later, I sold the mountain cabin. Patricia and I used the money to establish the Patricia Pierce Scholarship Fund for children of working families who wanted to go to college. The first recipient was the daughter of one of my electricians, a girl who wanted to be a teacher. At the scholarship ceremony, Patricia stood up slowly and handed the young woman her certificate. The girl's father, a man whose hands were permanently stained with honest work, had tears in his eyes. "This is how it should be," Patricia whispered to me, "helping people move forward, not holding them back." Kevin did call eventually, not to apologize, but to ask if I'd reconsider giving him access to the business accounts. I hung up without answering. Some lessons you can't teach, some values people have to learn on their own. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices. I'm Richard Pierce. I'm 58 years old. I served my country with honor, and I built a business with my own hands. My wife and I raised a son who forgot where he came from, but we didn't forget who we are. That's enough. It's always been enough, and it always will be. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you for listening. Remember, respect is earned, not inherited. Family is about love and loyalty, not money and status. And sometimes the hardest part about being a parent is knowing when to step back and let your children learn who they really are. You build your life with your own hands. Don't let anyone tear it down, not even someone you love. The truth I learned that day is this: you can't force people to respect you, but you sure as hell can stop subsidizing their disrespect. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone you love is showing them what it costs to lose you.